The environmental scan, an analytical exercise. The environmental scan is where you get to place emphasis on learning what other players view as important about the topic. In particular, as you progress through this exercise, you will find that you are able to begin identifying alternatives for solving the problem. This is an important step in moving your overall analysis forward for your client. Up until now, the literature review and historical background of the paper have provided your client with broad information to understand the problem. Assessing nuances of the current situation requires more in-depth study. Understanding how the environment outside of the client may impact their selection of a policy alternative is imperative. The environmental scan provides this information for your client. Politics and policy are inextricably intertwined. This part of the capstone project forces you to recognize the relationships that your client will have to come to terms with in order to make any recommendation work. An environmental scan provides the client with a political roadmap of key players and their views on a problem. 4 to 6 key players are highlighted in the scan. 6 to 12 decision characteristics for each of the key players are considered for study. A matrix of key players and decision characteristics is analyzed to provide insight about the problem's political context at the conclusion of the examination. Your client does not live in a vacuum. In fact, what they can and cannot do may be severely restricted by the other key players they come into contact with. It is up to you to highlight the most important players for them to focus on and supply them with the information they need to understand what these players are thinking. You must decide who the key players are. There are potentially an infinite number for every policy problem. Pick the 4 to 6 most important ones to analyze. Key players who can significantly impact the decision of the client to choose or implement a policy alternative matter most. Depending on your topic, there may be very high-profile key players or a mix of high-profile and low-profile ones. A president or a governor may be present alongside of a nonprofit organization and a local elected official. You need to decide, as the analyst, which of the players matter most and surface them in your analysis. A key player can be a person or an organization. Since you are writing this policy analysis for a client, the client is not a part of the environmental scan you are conducting. In order to simplify your work and maintain clarity, try not to choose broad groups as key players, such as Congress or the courts. Instead, identify the main representative of a group position, such as Senator X or Justice Y. Don't assume your client knows the key player that you are identifying well. It is up to you, the analyst, to clearly and concisely inform them of these individuals and organizations. In the text of the paper, make sure you identify each key player by name and title. Explain what each key player does professionally. Explain why the problem matters to the key player that you are reviewing. Explain how the key player could impact on a final decision or subsequent implementation plan. Tell your client why they should care about the key player you are examining. In deciding how many decision characteristics to include in the analysis, keep in mind the 12-page limit on the length of your paper. Once you have chosen your key players, you need to assess the conditions that shape how they view the problem. There are many decision characteristics that can be examined for each key player. You can list the top 6 that are most important to your analysis, or work with a larger list. The decision characteristics also serve to illustrate important differences among the key players. There are 6 necessary short list decision characteristics that should appear in your analysis. At a minimum, the 6 characteristics in this slide must be examined in this stage of your paper. However, you are free to go beyond this number as well. The 6 characteristics that must be in your paper are: first, causation. What does the key player think caused the problem? Second, crisis. Does the key player see the problem as a crisis? Third, proximity. How close is the key player to the problem? Fourth, means. How would the key player fix the problem? Fifth, ends. What is the result the key player wants to achieve? Sixth, essential. Is support by the key player essential to a solution? There are additional decision characteristics that you can include in your analysis. If you find any of the characteristics identified on this slide useful, you can utilize them to deepen your research. The goal is to maximize relevant information for your client, not simply expand the analysis. The additional possible decision characteristics are: first, level. Is the key player local, state, federal, or international? Sector. Is the key player public, private, nonprofit, or illicit? Urgency. Does the player think that change is essential, or can the key player make do with the status quo? Incidence. Does the key player think the problem is frequent? Deal breaker. Is there something which the key player cannot accept? Novelty. Is the problem unusual to the key player? Constituency. Who does the key player serve that is impacted most by the problem? Evidence. What information does the key player rely on? Metrics. What measures would be persuasive to the key player? In order to help you and your client visualize results of the environmental scan, a matrix is constructed to allow you both a means for consuming the information that has been unearthed in the analysis. In the matrix, the key players and decision characteristics are set into a table. The key players comprise the columns of the table. The decision characteristics comprise the rows of the table. Each cell is to be filled in with text or an appropriate ranking. Any ranking criteria you develop for a particular decision characteristic must be fully explained in the paper, preferably at the foot of the table. This slide provides a mock-up of a short list environmental scan. In cells where only text can be used to describe a result, such as what the cause of a problem may be to a given player, a number of sentences might appear in the cell. If a ranking is able to be used, such as if the player sees the issue as a crisis, with 1 meaning yes and 2 meaning no, then a number or a single word might appear. In order for the size to remain manageable, the interior of the matrix can be entered in 10-point font. This part of the exercise is where you begin to carefully dissect the political environment for your client. The environmental scan matrix enables you to examine different views of different key players against each other. Once the cells of the matrix have been filled out, you must analyze the results. Review each key player's decision characteristics and determine if there is a logic to what you see. Does the perceived cause help to explain the means and ends sought? What are the relationships among other characteristics? Before you make a determination of what information is important to report to your client, you must first view the results in their entirety. Compare the matrix results for key players against each other. Do the key players view the cause of the problem differently or similarly? What are their different approaches to resolving the problem? What is the outcome each key player wants to achieve? The results of the matrix analysis comprise the political context of the problem. Try not to get lost in the forest for the trees. Every cell in the matrix will more than likely have some information in it. Not every piece of information will be important to your overall analysis, and certainly not to your client. Examine the results to identify relevant findings. These findings from the matrix must be written up as text. The text should follow the matrix inside the paper. Do not try to explain the result for every cell of the matrix. Choose important findings to relate to the client. As a policy analyst, it is your job to surface only the most valuable information. The environmental scan is a critical part of the policy analysis. Therefore, it must be well represented in your final product. Think of this exercise as occurring in a series of stages. Identify the key players. Explain the decision characteristics. Create and complete the environmental scan matrix. Enter the findings from the analysis and the foregoing information into the body of the paper.